Kim Jong-Nam. In 2001, a seemingly small mistake by North Korea's ruling family created international embarrassment. Kim Jong-nam, the eldest son of leader Kim Jong-il and half-brother of future leader Kim Jong-un, attempted to enter Japan using a forged Dominican Republic passport. His goal was unusual for a man of his position. He wanted to visit Tokyo Disneyland. Japanese authorities quickly uncovered the forgery and detained him, exposing the incident to the global press. This blunder damaged Kim Jong-nam's credibility and embarrassed Pyongyang, leading his father to lose confidence in him as a successor. The fallout from this failed trip indirectly cleared the path for Kim Jong-un to rise to power years later, reshaping North Korea's leadership trajectory. Titanic. The sinking of the RMS Titanic in 1912 was the result of a combination of human overconfidence and poor decision-making. The ship, touted as unsinkable, carried insufficient lifeboats for all passengers, partly due to outdated maritime regulations and a belief in the vessel's invincibility. Despite ice warnings from other ships, the Titanic maintained high speed through icy waters. When it struck an iceberg, the collision breached multiple watertight compartments, leading to rapid flooding. Crew members struggled with evacuation due to lack of training and confusion. Over 1,500 people died, making it one of history's deadliest peacetime maritime disasters and a stark lesson in hubris and inadequate safety planning. Chernobyl. The Chernobyl disaster in 1986 was a result of critical human errors combined with flawed reactor design. Operators conducted a safety test on Reactor 4 without proper preparation, disabling critical safety systems. They ignored warning signs and procedural protocols, allowing the reactor to overheat. When the core became unstable, a massive explosion released radioactive material across Europe. The Soviet government initially tried to cover up the accident, delaying evacuations and medical treatment. This mistake exposed hundreds of thousands to radiation, caused long-term health crises, and permanently contaminated vast areas. It also eroded global trust in nuclear energy safety and highlighted the dangers of bureaucratic secrecy and poor training. U-110 capture. In May 1941, the German submarine U-110 surfaced after being damaged by British warships in the North Atlantic. The crew abandoned ship, believing it would sink. However, the submarine stayed afloat long enough for British sailors to board it. Inside, they discovered one of the most valuable mistakes of the war: an intact Enigma machine and codebooks. These devices were used by Germany to encrypt military communications. By capturing them, Allied cryptographers at Bletchley Park could break German codes more effectively. This breakthrough gave the Allies access to vital intelligence, helping them track U-boats and safeguard supply convoys. The oversight of leaving the machine behind shifted the balance in the Battle of the Atlantic. Vietnam War. The United States' involvement in the Vietnam War was marked by a series of strategic and political mistakes. Leaders underestimated the resilience of the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong, believing superior firepower and technology would secure victory. The use of controversial tactics, including widespread bombing and chemical defoliants like Agent Orange, alienated the local population. Political miscalculations led to inconsistent objectives and a lack of clear exit strategy, while media coverage turned public opinion against the war. Ultimately, the U.S. withdrew in 1973, leaving South Vietnam to fall in 1975. The war caused millions of deaths, destabilized the region, and deeply divided American society, highlighting the dangers of flawed foreign policy decisions. 4 Pests. In 1958, Mao Zedong launched the 4 Pests campaign in China, part of the Great Leap Forward. The program aimed to eliminate rats, flies, mosquitoes, and sparrows, which were blamed for spreading disease and damaging crops. Citizens across the country were mobilized to kill sparrows by destroying nests and scaring them until they collapsed from exhaustion. The policy backfired disastrously. With sparrows gone, insect populations, especially locusts, exploded unchecked and devastated crops. Combined with other agricultural mismanagement, this mistake contributed to a massive famine between 1959 and 1961, leading to tens of millions of deaths. A campaign meant to improve health and food supply instead amplified one of the worst human-made disasters in history. Space Shuttle Challenger. On January 28, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded 73 seconds after liftoff, killing all 7 crew members. Engineers had warned that the O-ring seals in the solid rocket boosters could fail in the unusually cold temperatures that morning. Management, under pressure to maintain the launch schedule, ignored these warnings. The failure of the O-rings allowed hot gases to escape, causing structural failure of the external fuel tank. This disaster halted the U.S. shuttle program for nearly 3 years, caused immense public shock, and prompted a major overhaul of NASA's safety protocols. It stands as a clear example of how organizational mistakes can have fatal consequences. World War I. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 was triggered by a chain of reckless decisions. After Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary was assassinated in Sarajevo, Austria issued an ultimatum to Serbia. Instead of pursuing diplomacy, alliances dragged multiple powers into conflict. Germany backed Austria, Russia supported Serbia, France allied with Russia, and Britain defended Belgium. Leaders underestimated the scale of modern industrial warfare, believing the war would end quickly. Instead, trench warfare, chemical weapons, and mass mobilization caused over 16 million deaths. The flawed handling of a regional crisis not only destroyed empires, but also set the stage for World War II, reshaping global politics permanently. Khwarezm mistake. In 1218, the Khwarezm Empire made a fatal diplomatic error that changed the map of Asia. Genghis Khan sent a trade caravan to the Khwarezmian city of Otrar, seeking peaceful relations and commerce. Instead of welcoming the envoys, the local governor accused them of spying and executed them. When Genghis Khan sent ambassadors to demand justice, the Shah of Khwarezm made an even greater mistake. He killed one envoy and mutilated the others. This grave insult violated Mongol diplomatic tradition, where envoys were considered untouchable. Genghis responded with full-scale war. His armies invaded Khwarezm, annihilating cities, massacring populations, and erasing the empire from history. A single act of arrogance triggered one of the most devastating campaigns of the Mongol conquests. Bay of Pigs. In 1961, the U.S.-backed Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba ended in total failure due to a series of miscalculations. The CIA trained and equipped around 1,400 Cuban exiles to overthrow Fidel Castro, expecting local support and a quick victory. Planners underestimated Castro's strength, overestimated anti-Castro sentiment, and failed to secure air superiority. The operation's secrecy was compromised, allowing Cuban forces to prepare defenses. Within 3 days, the invaders were captured or killed, and the mission embarrassed the Kennedy administration, strengthened Castro's position, and drove Cuba closer to the Soviet Union, escalating Cold War tensions. This demonstrates how flawed intelligence and overconfidence can drastically alter geopolitical outcomes. Napoleon's Russia. In 1812, Napoleon Bonaparte made a catastrophic mistake by invading Russia. Confident in his Grande Armée of over 600,000 soldiers, he aimed to force Tsar Alexander I back into alliance. However, the Russians used a scorched earth strategy, burning crops and villages so the French found no food or shelter. When Napoleon reached Moscow, the city was abandoned and set on fire. With no supplies and winter setting in, his army faced starvation, disease, and freezing temperatures. Only around 100,000 men survived the retreat. This failure shattered Napoleon's dominance in Europe, encouraged his enemies, and ultimately led to his downfall and exile just 3 years later. Fire of Alexandria. The burning of the Library of Alexandria is one of the most damaging mistakes in human history. This library, founded in the 3rd century BCE in Egypt, was meant to gather all the world's knowledge. Ships docking in the harbor were forced to surrender their manuscripts, which were then copied for the collection. But during conflicts, possibly Julius Caesar's siege of Alexandria in 48 BCE or later attacks, the library was burned. Countless works of science, mathematics, medicine, and history were destroyed. The loss crippled the transmission of ancient knowledge, erasing inventions, philosophies, and discoveries that could have advanced human civilization centuries earlier. Trojan War. According to legend, the Trojan War began because of a single foolish dispute. A golden apple marked for the fairest sparked a quarrel among 3 Greek goddesses. Paris, prince of Troy, was asked to judge and chose Aphrodite, who promised him the love of Helen, the wife of a Greek king. Paris abducted Helen, and this act ignited a decade-long war between Troy and the Greek city-states. The war destroyed Troy, cost countless lives, and reshaped the Greek world. Whether myth or partly based on real conflicts, the story illustrates how vanity, desire, and reckless decisions by leaders could spiral into mass destruction and alter ancient Mediterranean history. Maginot Line. France's reliance on the Maginot Line before World War II was a major strategic miscalculation. Constructed in the 1930s, the line was an extensive system of fortifications along the German border, intended to prevent invasion. French military planners assumed Germany would attack directly, but the Germans bypassed the line by invading through Belgium, where defenses were weaker. French forces were slow to respond, and the static nature of the fortifications left them vulnerable to modern, fast-moving mechanized warfare. The failure of the Maginot Line contributed to the rapid fall of France in 1940, demonstrating how rigid planning and underestimation of enemy tactics can lead to catastrophic consequences. Fall of Rome. The Western Roman Empire collapsed in 476 CE, but its decline was driven by a long series of political and military mistakes. Roman leaders relied heavily on mercenaries instead of loyal citizens to defend borders, weakening military discipline. Corruption and civil wars drained resources, while overtaxation burdened the population. Emperors frequently rose and fell, creating instability. The decision to split the empire into East and West further fractured authority. When Germanic tribes, pressured by the Huns, invaded, Rome could no longer respond effectively. The empire that once united Europe crumbled, leading to centuries of fragmented rule, economic regression, and the loss of centralized learning and infrastructure. History is full of mistakes, but some of the most baffling were wars fought for the pettiest, most pointless reasons imaginable. From feuds that spiraled out of control to conflicts that achieved nothing but chaos, these stories are as absurd as they are tragic. Don't forget to subscribe and watch our next video, where we dive into the most ridiculously pointless wars in history.